The badge hit the counter before she even understood the words. "Effective immediately," the manager said, not quite looking at her. "Security will walk you out." Maya Jennings stood behind the counter she'd cleaned every morning for 6 years, her name tag still pinned crooked to her blazer, and felt the entire bank go quiet around her. Customers pretended not to watch, coworkers pretended not to hear. She didn't cry. She didn't know, standing there in that silence, that the woman she'd helped the day before, the one who'd shuffled in with a cane and a folder of confused paperwork, was about to change the rest of her life. She had no idea who she'd really been talking to. Maya Jennings was 34 years old, and she had been the most reliable person at Heritage Trust Bank's downtown branch for longer than most of her coworkers had worked there. She showed up 10 minutes early every day. She stayed late when the lines ran long. She remembered regulars' names, their kids' names, whether they took their receipts or waved them off. She'd started as a teller at 22, fresh out of community college, and she'd never once been late, never once called in without a real reason, never once raised her voice at a difficult customer, no matter how difficult they got. She lived in a one-bedroom apartment 11 minutes from the branch, drove a car with 200,000 miles on it that she babied like a pet, and sent money to her mother every month without fail because her mother's hip surgery 2 years ago had never fully healed and the bills never really stopped. She wasn't chasing a promotion. She wasn't trying to be noticed. She just believed in a quiet and unglamorous way that if you treated people right, the world eventually treated you right back. Her manager, a sharp-jawed man named Russell Kane, had transferred to the branch 8 months earlier from corporate, and from his first week, something about Maya seemed to irritate him. Maybe it was that customers asked for her by name. Maybe it was that she'd been offered a shift lead position twice and turned them both down because she didn't want the politics. Whatever it was, Russell watched her the way a man watches something he's already decided to get rid of. Just waiting for the right excuse. He would get one soon enough. He just wouldn't understand until it was far too late exactly what that excuse was going to cost him. What none of Maya's coworkers knew, what she rarely mentioned to anyone, was that she'd once turned down a scholarship 2 states away because her mother's first surgery had come up that same summer, and there'd been no one else to sit in the waiting room, no one else to drive her to appointments, no one else to make sure the bills got paid on time. She didn't talk about it like a sacrifice. She talked about it, on the rare occasions it came up at all, like it had simply been the obvious thing to do. Family took care of family. That philosophy just happened to extend, quietly, to strangers too, whether or not anyone ever noticed or thanked her for it. There was a version of Maya that existed only in these small, unwitnessed moments. The extra 5 minutes she gave an old man who couldn't remember his PIN. The way she'd once let a single mother's card decline twice without embarrassing her in front of the line, quietly covering the difference herself and telling her it must have been a system error. She never mentioned these things to anyone. They weren't performances. They were just who she was when nobody was grading her for it. It was a Thursday afternoon when the elderly woman came in. She moved slowly, leaning on a wooden cane with a brass handle worn smooth from years of use, wearing a plain gray coat that clearly once was expensive, but was now simply old, like her. She carried a manila folder stuffed with papers, the edges soft and curled from being handled too many times. She got in Maya's line. "I need to close out an account," the woman said, setting the folder down with visible effort. "My husband's account. He passed in the spring." "I'm so sorry for your loss," Maya said, and meant it, not the automatic customer service version, the real one. The woman's paperwork was a mess. Wrong forms, an outdated power of attorney, a death certificate that hadn't been properly certified by the county. Any teller strictly following policy would have sent her away to come back with the right documents, and on a slow day, most would have. Maya didn't. She spent 40 minutes with her. She called the back office herself to find a workaround. She walked the woman through what she'd actually need, wrote it down in large, clear handwriting because the woman mentioned her eyes weren't what they used to be.
When a $12 wire fee couldn't be waived through normal channels, Maya quietly covered it herself, rather than watch the woman count out crumpled bills from a coin purse. At one point, the woman's hands started to shake as she tried to sign a form, and she laughed a little at herself, embarrassed, saying her hands hadn't been steady since the funeral. Maya didn't rush her. She just waited, quietly refilling the woman's water cup from the cooler behind the counter without being asked, and let the silence sit there until the woman was ready. "He handled all of this," the woman said at one point, gesturing at the folder. 41 years, and I never once had to sit in a bank and figure any of it out myself. I don't even know what half of these forms mean. You don't have to know. That's what I'm here for. We'll figure it out together. The line behind them grew to 5 people, then 7. A man 2 spots back sighed loudly and checked his watch, and Maya felt the pressure of it, the unspoken math every teller learns to do. Minutes against patience, patience against complaints. She didn't speed up. She decided somewhere in the first 10 minutes that this particular Thursday afternoon belonged to this particular woman, and everyone else would simply have to wait their turn. When they were finished, the woman didn't move to leave right away. She looked at Maya for a long moment. "You didn't have to do all that," she said. "You looked like you needed someone to slow down for you, that's all." The woman smiled, a small private smile, like she was filing something away. "What's your name, dear?" "Maya." "Maya," the woman repeated softly, like she wanted to remember it. Then she gathered her folder, and Maya walked her all the way out to the curb, holding the door, waiting with her until a black car pulled up to collect her. Maya didn't think about the car. She didn't think about the coat, or the cane, or the quiet, unhurried dignity of the woman at all once the day moved on. She had a line to get back to. It was just another Thursday. She had no idea she'd just spent 40 minutes with Eleanor Cross, widow of a shipping magnate, mother of one of the wealthiest men on the East Coast, and, as of 6 months ago, the largest single shareholder in the parent company that owned Heritage Trust Bank. Russell Kane found out about the fee the next morning. It came up in a routine transaction audit, a $12 discrepancy covered out of pocket, logged under Maya's teller ID with a note explaining the waiver. To anyone reasonable, it would have looked exactly like what it was, an employee quietly helping a confused, grieving widow. To Russell, it looked like an opening. He called her into his office before her shift even started. "Unauthorized fee waivers," he said, sliding a printout across the desk like evidence in a trial. "Falsifying account documentation. Do you understand how serious this is?" "I didn't falsify anything. Her paperwork was outdated, I helped her get compliant documents, and I covered a $12 fee out of my own pocket because she was a widow trying to close her husband's account. I can show you the log." "The log shows you deviated from procedure." "The procedure would have sent an 80-year-old woman back out into the cold to refile paperwork she didn't understand." Russell's jaw tightened. This wasn't about the $12, and some small cornered part of him seemed to know it, but he'd been waiting for something to hang his decision on, and this was close enough. "I've already spoken with HR. This isn't a conversation, it's a notification." She sat there for a moment, disbelief settling into something heavier. "You're firing me for helping someone?" "I'm firing you for a documented policy violation." It happened fast after that, faster than 6 years should have allowed. She was walked to her locker by a security guard who wouldn't meet her eyes, made to hand over her badge in full view of the lobby, made to gather 6 years of small accumulated life, a coffee mug, a photo of her mother, a cardigan she kept for cold mornings, into a cardboard box while customers she'd served for years watched in uncomfortable silence. One of her coworkers, a younger teller named Priya, tried to say something in her defense and was cut off by Russell with a single look. Nobody else tried after that. Not because they didn't care, but because they'd all seen what happened to people who pushed back against Russell Kane, and none of them could afford to lose their jobs over someone else's fight. Maya asked, quietly, if she could at least finish her shift so the customers already in her line wouldn't be left standing. Russell said no. Someone else would cover it. It wasn't about the line. And everyone in the room understood that, even if nobody said it out loud. She was given a form to sign acknowledging her termination and a second form waiving any right to contest it, both of which she was told to sign as a formality before she'd even had time to read them. She signed anyway, hands steady, even though nothing else in her felt steady, because some tired practical part of her mind had already started calculating rent, and arguing over paperwork in that moment felt like a fight she didn't have the strength to win. Maya caught up with her in the parking lot, breathless, having slipped out on an unauthorized break. "This is insane. Everyone knows why he did this. Everyone knows it's not about the fee." "Everyone knowing doesn't get me my job back," Maya said, because none of this was Priya's fault, and she didn't have it in her to be angry at the one person who'd tried. Maya carried her box out through the same doors she'd held open for a widow the day before. Nobody offered her a ride. Nobody offered her severance beyond the legal minimum. She sat in her car in the parking lot for a long time before she could make herself turn the key, staring at the building that had been the center of her working life for 6 years, wondering how something so small had cost her everything so fast. She drove home along the same streets she drove every day, past the same gas station, the same church, the same crosswalk where kids from the elementary school crossed every afternoon, and none of it looked the way it usually did. It all looked like a life that had quietly, without warning, stopped belonging to her. She didn't call anyone that night, not her mother, who would worry, and whose hip surgery bills Maya was still quietly covering every month. Not her closest friend, who would want to come over immediately with wine and outrage, when what Maya actually wanted was silence. She sat on her couch in the dark for a long time, still in her blazer, the cardboard box unopened by the door, and let herself feel exactly as small as the day had made her feel. She opened her laptop once around midnight and pulled up a job board out of habit more than hope, scrolling through listings for tellers and customer service roles she'd have laughed off a week earlier as beneath her experience. 6 years, and it had come to this, refreshing a page in the dark, trying to remember how to introduce herself as someone starting over. She didn't want to say it out loud yet. "I got fired for being kind," because saying it out loud would make it real, and it already felt unbearably real enough. She had no way of knowing that 400 miles away, in a glass office on the 40th floor of a building bearing his family's name, a phone was about to ring. Daniel Cross was in a board meeting when his assistant interrupted, which never happened, not for anything short of an emergency. "It's your mother," she said quietly. "It says it's important." He stepped out. "Mom, is everything—" "I'm fine," Eleanor said before he could finish. "I need you to do something for me, and I need you to do it quietly." Daniel Cross had built his own fortune twice over, first in logistics, then in a series of acquisitions that had made him, by 39, one of the wealthiest self-made men in the country. He was known in boardrooms for being calm under pressure, for never raising his voice, for making decisions with a stillness that unsettled people who expected wealth to come with noise. But something in his mother's voice made him go very still now. "There's a young woman, a bank teller, Heritage Trust, downtown branch. Her name is Maya Jennings. Yesterday, she spent nearly an hour helping me close your father's account. Real help, Daniel, not the kind people give when they think someone's watching. She paid a fee out of her own pocket without blinking. She held the door. She walked me to the car." "Okay," Daniel said slowly. That's kind of her, Mom. Why do you sound like this?" "Because this morning I had someone check in on her. Make sure she got a proper thank you note, maybe a gift basket. Nothing dramatic." A pause. "She was fired last night for helping me. Quick task. If you are enjoying this story and you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, kindly like and subscribe to this channel. Thank you. Now back to the story. Daniel didn't say anything for a moment. They fired her over a $12 fee she covered herself, Eleanor continued, her voice sharpening in a way Daniel rarely heard. Because a manager decided the rules mattered more than a grieving widow standing in his lobby. I want you to look into this, Daniel, quietly. I want to know exactly what happened, and I want to know who Russell Kane is. Daniel walked back into his office and closed the door. He sat down at his desk and for a long moment didn't move. Then he opened his laptop and pulled up something he hadn't looked at in months. A slide from an internal report his acquisitions team had put together back in the spring, when Cross Holdings had quietly become the majority stakeholder in a regional banking group. Heritage Trust Bank, one of 40 branches under that umbrella. He hadn't paid it much attention at the time. It was a small piece of a much larger deal. It wasn't small anymore. His assistant, standing in the doorway, asked if she should reschedule the rest of his afternoon. He said yes, all of it, without hesitation, a first in the 2 years she'd worked for him. She didn't ask why. She'd learned over time that when Daniel Cross went quiet like this, it was never over something small. He thought, sitting there, about the version of his mother most people saw now. Soft-spoken, careful with her steps, easy to underestimate in a gray coat with a cane. They didn't know the version he'd grown up with, the woman who'd once driven 2 hours in a snowstorm to sit with a housekeeper's daughter in the hospital waiting room because no one else could, who had never in his memory let a person's usefulness to her determine how she treated them. He'd built an empire, believing, somewhere underneath all the spreadsheets, that this was the actual inheritance she'd given him, not the money, the instinct. Which was exactly why what had happened to Maya Jennings didn't sit like an inconvenience. It sat like a personal insult. He picked up his phone and called his head of legal. "I need everything on a branch manager named Russell Kane," he said, "and I need it by tonight." By early evening, his legal team had pulled together a preliminary picture, and none of it made him feel any calmer. A manager with a documented pattern of pressuring out employees he found difficult to control. A branch that had quietly bled talent for the better part of a year while corporate looked the other way, distracted by bigger numbers elsewhere in the portfolio. And somewhere in the middle of all of it, an 80-year-old widow who had simply wanted help closing her late husband's account, and a young woman who had given her that help without knowing or caring who she was. There was a name buried in the file that stopped him for a moment. A teller from 18 months earlier, let go under circumstances that looked, on paper, almost identical to Maya's. A minor policy deviation, a termination pushed through in under a day, no appeal, no severance beyond the legal minimum, no one at corporate ever asking a single question about it. Daniel sat with that thought for a long moment. He thought about how easily it could have gone the other way, how easily his mother, on a bad day, in a confusing branch, with an impatient teller, might have left that bank feeling small and unseen instead of cared for. How many other people, without a billionaire son to notice, simply did leave that way, every day, and nobody ever found out, and nothing ever changed. Then he sat back, and for the first time since the call started, allowed himself to feel the full weight of what his mother had told him, not as a businessman assessing an asset, but as a son whose mother had been quietly, casually failed by someone who had no idea who he was dealing with. He booked a flight for the next morning. By the time Daniel's plane landed, his legal team had assembled a full picture, not just of Russell Kane's decision, but of a pattern.
2 prior complaints about his treatment of staff, both quietly buried, a habit of writing employees up for minor infractions in the weeks before performance reviews, a branch with the highest staff turnover in the entire regional group, a statistic no one at corporate had bothered to ask about until now. And there was Maya's employee file. 6 years, 0 disciplinary actions before this one, consistently rated among the top-performing tellers in the district for customer satisfaction. Termination processed under 18 hours, with a write-up so thin his legal counsel had used the word pretextual twice in the same email. Daniel read it all in the back of a car on the way to his mother's house, jaw tightening with every page. Eleanor was waiting for him on the porch when he arrived, still holding the same folder of paperwork from the day before, like it mattered to her that he see exactly what Maya had helped her with. "I don't want a lawsuit," Eleanor said before he could speak. "I don't want a public apology or a settlement check that makes this go away quietly so everyone can feel better about themselves. I want that young woman to understand, in a way she can't misunderstand, that what she did mattered. That kindness like that doesn't just disappear into a box on a lobby floor." Daniel looked at his mother for a long moment. This woman who had raised him with exactly that same instinct, who had never once let him believe money made a person more important than the way they treated a stranger. "I already own the bank, Mom," he said quietly. "I just didn't know it yet." "Then act like it." He didn't sleep much that night. He sat with his laptop at his mother's kitchen table, working through the structure of it. Not a punishment, not a stunt, but something real. A leadership vacancy that had, as of that morning, technically already existed at the regional level. A candidate whose file, stripped of the termination, was better than anyone else's in the district. By 2 a.m., it wasn't a plan anymore. It was a decision. He was going to walk into that branch himself.
Maya almost didn't go back. She'd spent the morning updating her resume at her kitchen table, coffee going cold beside her, trying not to think too hard about the gap she'd now have to explain in every future interview. But a message had come the night before, a call from an unknown number, a voicemail asking her, politely, to come by the branch at 10 a.m. regarding your recent employment status. She almost deleted it. Curiosity, or maybe just the need for closure, made her go. She sat in her car outside the branch for a full 5 minutes before going in, rehearsing what she might say if this turned out to be nothing more than a request to return her uniform or sign one last form. She told herself not to hope for anything more than that. Hope, in the last 24 hours, had proven to be an expensive thing to carry around. She walked in wearing the same blazer she'd worn the day she was let go, badgeless now, and felt every eye in the lobby land on her at once. Russell spotted her from across the floor and started toward her, already annoyed, already forming the sentence that would get her out of his branch, when the front doors opened again behind her. A man in a dark gray suit walked in. No entourage, no announcement, just a quiet, unhurried presence that made the air in the room shift before anyone understood why. "Sir, can I help you?" Russell asked, switching instantly into his most polished voice. "I hope so. I'm looking for the manager of this branch." "That's me, Russell Kane." He extended a hand. "And you are?" "Daniel Cross." The name landed on Russell like nothing at all. A stranger's name, forgettable, no different from any other customer's. He had no reason yet to feel the ground shift. "I'll need a few minutes of your time. There's a matter regarding a termination that happened here yesterday." Russell's smile thinned. "I'm not able to discuss personnel matters with the majority shareholder of the company that owns this bank." Daniel said it, plainly, without theater, the way a man says something he's simply stating as a fact. "I think you'll find you are."
The colors started leaving Russell's face in real time.
"Cross Holdings acquired this banking group 6 months ago," Daniel continued. "I've been a fairly hands-off owner. Until yesterday, when my mother told me about a teller who spent an hour helping her close her late husband's account and paid a $12 fee herself so a grieving widow wouldn't have to count coins out of her purse in front of a line of strangers." He turned for the first time to look at Maya standing frozen near the entrance. "You helped my mother yesterday," Daniel said. "Eleanor Cross." Maya's mouth opened and nothing came out. The name rearranged itself in her memory, the gray coat, the brass cane, the quiet dignity, and landed somewhere she couldn't quite process yet. Russell, beside them, had gone completely silent. The printout of a $12 violation suddenly the smallest, stupidest thing in the room. He glanced towards his office, as if some part of him were calculating whether there was still time to disappear into it and pretend the last 90 seconds hadn't happened. There wasn't. There's clearly been some kind of misunderstanding, Russell finally managed, his voice climbing half an octave higher than it had been a minute earlier. If I'd known who Mrs. Cross was, obviously, that's the problem, Daniel said, cutting him off, not unkindly, but without any give in it either. You shouldn't have needed to know who she was. She was an 80-year-old widow standing at your counter with a stack of confusing paperwork. That should have been enough. The lobby, which had gone quiet the moment Daniel walked in, had by now gone completely still. Tellers frozen mid-transaction, customers in line no longer pretending not to listen. Someone near the back had quietly taken out their phone, though whether to film or simply to text someone, "You will not believe what's happening right now," no one could say. I looked at the numbers on the way here, Daniel continued, turning slightly so his voice carried without him needing to raise it. This branch has lost 11 employees in the last year. 11. That's not a coincidence, and it's not bad luck. That's a pattern, and it has a name, and the name is standing in front of me.
Russell's mouth opened again, and closed again, and nothing came out this time, at all. He looked, for the first time since Maya had known him, like a man who understood exactly how small he actually was. "I'm not here to make a scene," Daniel said, his voice steady, directed now at the small crowd that had gathered without quite meaning to. "I'm here because my mother asked me to fix something, and I intend to." He turned back to Russell. "Your employment with this company is terminated effective immediately. HR will be in touch about the details. I'd also encourage you to expect a broader review of this branch's practices. I understand this isn't the first complaint about how staff here have been treated. It will be the last one that gets ignored." Russell opened his mouth, found nothing to say, and didn't try again. Two men Maya didn't recognize appeared near the entrance to his office, waiting with the kind of patience that made it clear they weren't leaving without him. Then Daniel turned to Maya, and something in his expression softened, the businessman falling away into something more like the son his mother had raised. "My mother doesn't hand out compliments easily. She talked about you the entire drive home yesterday, not because you did your job, because you did it like it mattered, like she mattered, not just her account balance." He reached into his jacket and handed her a folder, not unlike the worn manila one that Eleanor had carried the day before, except this one was crisp, new, embossed with the regional banking group's letterhead. "This branch, along with 3 others in the district, need new regional leadership. I've reviewed your file. 6 years, top-rated in customer service every single one of them. 0 disciplinary history before yesterday's pretextual, according to my legal team, termination. I'm not offering you your old job back, Maya. I'm offering you Russell's. Regional CEO, effective as soon as you're ready." Maya stood there holding the folder, the lobby gone completely silent around her, the same lobby that 24 hours earlier had watched her carry a cardboard box out the door in humiliated silence. Priya, the young teller who'd tried to speak up for her the day before, had tears in her eyes near the counter. Maya's voice caught. "I don't know what to say." "You already said everything that mattered," Daniel told her. "Yesterday, to a woman you thought was just another customer with confusing paperwork." Maya thought of Eleanor's small, private smile as she'd gathered her folder at the counter. "What's your name, dear?" And understood now that it hadn't been idle politeness. It had been someone quietly deciding that kindness like that didn't get to disappear. She thought, too, of her mother, who would ask tonight, as she always did, how work had gone, expecting to hear the same careful, worried non-answer Maya had been giving her for the past 2 days. She let herself imagine, just for a second, the sound her mother would make on the other end of the phone when she heard the real answer instead, and felt her eyes sting for the first time since this had all started, not from grief this time, but from something with much more room to breathe in it. Priya was openly crying near the counter now, one hand pressed to her mouth, and when Maya caught her eye, Priya mouthed to her tears, "I told you," even though neither of them had told anyone anything. They'd simply both known, in the quiet way people who work side by side for years come to know things about each other, that Maya deserved better than what this branch had given her. "There's something else," Daniel said, before Maya could fully collect herself. "My mother wanted me to tell you something specific, in case I forgot the rest of it in translation. She said, and I'm quoting her exactly because she made me write it down, 'Tell her I don't forget people who slow down for me, and tell her the next widow who walks into one of my branches deserves to be treated exactly the way she treated me. That's her job now. Make sure of it.'" Maya let out something between a laugh and a sob, pressing the folder against her chest like it might otherwise slip from her hands. She looked around the branch one more time. The counter she'd cleaned every morning for 6 years, the doors she'd held for strangers, the box she'd carried out just yesterday believing that decency hadn't been enough. Russell was gone now, quietly escorted toward the back by the 2 men who'd appeared from nowhere the moment Daniel gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. Every eye in the room was on Maya. It had been enough. It had just taken the right person noticing. "Okay," Maya said, finally, her voice steadier now, something settling into place behind her eyes that looked a great deal like the future. "When do I start?" Daniel smiled for the first time since walking in. "How about now?" 3 weeks later, Maya sat in an office on the top floor of the regional headquarters, the city spread out below the window in a way she still hadn't gotten used to. On her desk, next to a stack of files she was slowly learning to move through with the same care she'd once given a single confused customer at a teller window, sat a small brass-handled cane, gifted to her by Eleanor Cross herself, with a note that said simply, "For the next widow who needs someone to slow down." Priya had been the first person Maya called with an opening on her new team, not as a favor, but because she knew exactly what kind of teller Priya was, and exactly what kind of person the branch needed more of. She'd since promoted 2 more employees from that same downtown branch, both of them people who'd quietly told her in private that they'd been afraid to speak up while Russell was still there. Maya kept one thing on her desk that had nothing to do with the job at all: the cardboard box, empty now, folded flat, and tucked in the corner of a closet she rarely opened. She hadn't been able to throw it away. It felt somehow like proof, not of what she'd lost, but of what had been waiting for her on the other side of losing it. She thought some nights about how close the whole thing had come to never happening at all. If she'd been having a bad day, if the line had been longer, if she'd let a small, tired part of herself send Eleanor Cross back out into the cold with the wrong paperwork, the way policy technically allowed. None of what came after would have happened. Not the firing that felt like the end of the world, not the phone call 400 floors above her that she'd never known about, not the folder that changed everything. She hadn't done any of it because she was calculating an outcome. She'd done it because it was simply who she was when nobody was watching. And it turned out, in the end, that someone had been watching all along. That was the part she tried to explain to Priya months later over coffee, when Priya asked her how she'd known somehow that helping that particular woman on that particular Thursday would matter so much. Maya told her the truth. She hadn't known anything. She'd just decided, a long time ago, that kindness didn't need a reason, and that the world, sooner or later, tended to remember the people who lived that way, even when nobody was keeping score. Sometimes it took a while to prove it, but it always did, eventually. If this story moved you even a little, that's exactly why I make these.
Stories about people who choose kindness even when no one's watching and get seen for it eventually. That's Maya's story. But stories like this don't find new people on their own. They need viewers like you to share them. Subscribe if you want more stories about quiet kindness getting the recognition it deserves. Tell me in the comments which part hit you hardest, the firing or the reveal.